Okay, now we are recording. Fabulous. Well, welcome on to Literary Souls. I know this is going to be technically a pre-recording, but it's probably going to go like all of the other Literary Souls, and we're just going to have fun and be crazy and all the things. But welcome, Mara. It's nice to have you here. And you are also a Tolkien fan, like many others who I've brought on this show. And I imagine that you probably know a lot more than I do about Tolkien even. So like
probably a little bit, probably a little bit.
Just a smidge, yeah. Showing off your collection, like, look at all of the collections of books that I have, you peasants. So how'd you first, like, come across Tolkien? Like, what was your first experience, and then what hooked you to Tolkien?
Actually, like, first off, thank you for having me. Like, I know
You're
this is
welcome.
recording pretty much, but, thank you for having me on the stream. Like, my first experience was actually the Hobbit cartoon. Remember that animated movie?
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember how old I was when I like watched it, but I know I was very young.
It
And
was a little bit of a creepy cartoon, if I remember.
It kind of was, but it still fascinated me because it was fantasy, and you have hobbits and elves and dwarves and this Smog the dragon and all that. Not going to the details of the story, pretty much, but like it's all those like basically just litany of different characters.
Yeah, I remember thinking Smog
Gandalf,
like
the wizard, who's technically the Maiar. He is a Maiar, pretty much. And
Peace.
so like, I'm going to kind of segue here. So when I say that he could smoked Dumbledore, I'm not saying that because I don't like Dumbledore. I'm just saying it's literally a human versus an angel, pretty much. And I discovered that the more I got into reading about Tolkien, but because of that animated movie, it was if you like that, from my parents, if you like that, then you should read the book. And it's like one of those, like, just like mind blowing, like this is based on the book.
Most people are like, what? Books are amazing? Like, yes, come to the book side, please.
So basically, like, The Hobbit pretty much was my gateway into Tolkien. And then I read Lord of the Rings, and I reread Lord of the Rings when the movies came out.
So you critique them and say, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. They took out all these people.
Sort of at the same time. Like, I'm like you're still enthralled with those movies.
Yeah, they're still good, even though there's no Tom Bombadil.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to put a hot take here. I'm fine with them not being in it. Because if you think about it, it's not that I have anything against the character. I love the character. It's not that I have anything against the character. It's because it kind of takes away from the power and the foreboding behind the ring. Because like that's what the story is, like, one of the central themes on, like, how, like, this ring is basically the soul of Sauron in it. It's the embodiment of evil, and you have this guy just throwing it up in the air like this, and just struggling with it, and like it kind of takes it away a little bit from that foreboding. So I get not including Tom Bombadil. I'm not saying that because I don't like the character, as I said. It's just because it kind of, okay, now we have we still have that sense of like urgency to get this ring from the Shire to Mount Doom, pretty much. But
yeah, I actually agree with your take.
one issue I did have, but then again, I understand why they didn't do it, is when they turned Arwen into kind of a warrior princess, elf princess, because it was Glorfindel that actually took Frodo. Well, actually not took Frodo. He actually put Frodo on his horse, smacked the bottom, and let the horse go to Rivendell, pretty much. It was
because the horses are smart in the books.
Yes. So, and then they basically, the rest, including Glorfindel, who's a male elf, like a prince, traveled with the rest of the group. So that's how that situation occurred. So I get not including him because he pretty much doesn't show up the remainder of the story. Like, he's there, then he's in Rivendell, and then he's like just gone. Yes, so I kind of understand not including the character, because people would be wondering, okay, why should I care about that character? Because he's like not nowhere else in these movies. So it's like one of those was like love-hate, like,
right. Yeah, you understand why they made some creative different choices in the movies, but also there are some parts it's just like, They didn't. I always felt like the Rivendell like scenes were too short because there was so much more. Like I really was upset that they shortened the conversation between Aragorn and Boromir. I
Mhm.
was like, that was such a great conversation. Why did you cut it down?
Yeah, I know. It's like it's one of those like again, I've never really been a purist, but at the same time, it's like you do wish that they had included a bit more of the conversation because you get a real feel of the characters. So that way, when Boromir tries taking the ring, you have a better perspective of where he's coming from, and like why, like it's like and why he does what he does, and the fact that he actually broke free from the ring's power is actually um a lot more significant than the movie kind of depicted that he was
Yeah.
able to break free and redeem himself,
Yeah,
during that part.
I feel like the movies kind of did Boromir a disservice a little bit. They made him seem like he was a little bit more underhanded than what he actually was.
Mhm,
Like
yeah.
like he's not underhanded in the movies, but in the movies you're like, oh, he's gonna turn to the dark side or whatnot. Like before any of the others, whereas actually in the books, like, nah, he's a pretty noble character.
Yeah.
Like he does, you don't think he's gonna betray the hobbits or do anything bad. It's more of a surprise in the books versus the movies. At least I
Yeah.
felt like that.
But when yeah, definitely in the movies because they do like they do show hints here and there where it's like, he's like just does this and things like that, where it's like you can tell that he's fighting some control that's happening over him. But yeah, like you pointed out that he is extremely noble. Like he is very much like Aragorn in the sense in the books. In terms of that personality. But then again, like I said, you get a feel for where he's coming from because I'm not sure how you are about swearing on your channel, but
I don't
Denethor's a
care.
dick, pretty much. Denethor is a dick in the movies
He's an
and the books, pretty
asshole. What
much.
are you
And
talking?
yeah, he's an asshole. His like Boromir's father, Lord Denethor, is pretty much an asshole. So you
Mm-hmm.
kind of sympathize where Boromir is coming from because it's really not necessarily him wanting to do this. He's pretty much under orders essentially from his father.
But he's still
And
the favorite
yeah.
child, and no one will ever feel the same way about Faramir because he was the lonely little child, always living under Boromir's shadow.
But it was a deleted scene. I wish they had kept it in the movie, but to Boromir's credits, like he did confront his father about that. It was a deleted scene. I believe it was a deleted scene because they showed uh it was in Two Towers because Faramir was holding Boromir's horn
Mm-hmm.
and he was like remembering
Oh, okay. I think I did. I remember seeing
yeah,
part of that deleted scene.
yeah,
Yeah.
a past memory and it involved his brother. And and then basically they're celebrating the victory that they achieved, and of course like Denethor comes because like obviously he's going to be there for the celebration, and and Denethor congratulates Boromir, and Boromir is like it's like it also belongs to Faramir, like to his credit, like Boromir, like it's just it makes this they don't I wish they kept that scene in the movie because you have this the poor relationship between Faramir and Denethor, and it's obvious that Boromir is the favorite. So I wish they had shown that Boromir wasn't actually like his father.
Right. Because like the movies make you like it's not an exact replica, but they make you feel like he's more like his father than what he actually is.
Yeah. That's what I
Like,
said. That's one thing that I wish that they had kept, like right, like just thinking about it right off the bat, is that memory, just so like those who have not read the books and like can actually get a better perspective on the relationship that Boromir had not only with his father but with his brother, because Boromir pretty much was like a father figure to Faramir because of the
mm-hmm.
how Denethor treated Faramir. So Boromir basically took that at least part of that mantle, and so they did have a very good relationship, but we never got
And
to see that.
Faramir is like I feel like also like in the movies, Faramir is not as noble as he actually is in the books either. I feel like that like as far as the Gondorians, like they're kind of minimized as far as their honor and their nobility and stuff. Like it just seems like they never measure up to Aragorn, and like just from my feelings of the movies,
Mhm.
because like Faramir, like he's very noble. He does he does a ton of things for the hobbits. He doesn't kidnap them.
I know he doesn't. He really did not kidnap them.
Ah!
So
He's like, I will take you under my wing and protect you because there's evil afoot.
yeah, it's kind of like I think they. I'm only just guessing based on just like how the movies turned out, but I'm just guessing like the mindset was they had to show the Gondorians a certain way because of like Lord Denethor was steward and of his
Influence.
he was losing his mind because he had a Palantir. So he was like slowly losing his
the
mind too.
Palantir was just basically like, hey, I'm Sauron whispering in your ear.
Yes,
Like the ring times 50.
And so I don't like again. I wish they hadn't done that because, like you pointed out, the Gondorians were actually like extremely as basically the I don't want to say race, but like that group.
Mm-hmm.
That they were extremely noble. They were very much like it's like that's why like you have the Gondor and Rohan pretty much.
The
Like
beacons are lit.
Yes. Like basically, Gondor calls for aid. So.
Mm-hmm. And like
I still think I would serve Theoden over Denethor, like easily, pretty much. So, but I have nothing against Gondorians. I have nothing against Gondorians. I just don't want to serve Denethor.
Right. Well, and like I forget. I think it was because me and Arkasul we went through some of the histories of Middle Earth, and I'm forgetting if it's the Unfinished Tales or if it's the histories of Middle Earth. But there was one that kind of goes through the backstory of Denethor and how he actually was kind of noble, and then the more and more he was influenced by the Pontiri, like the more and more insane he became. But it kind of goes to credit him that he was able to stave off the influence of the Dark Lord for however long he did, because it was for a long time that he was able to not succumb to madness, but it was slow. Yeah, like
he was still affected by it. It's like he wasn't turned in any way, but at the same time, it was one of those like basically affecting the minds where it's hopelessness.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's seeing, because that's what part of what the Palantir shows is that what's yet to come, or what could come, pretty much.
Right.
So when you have that sense of hopelessness and like thinking that there's no way to at all alter the course, I can understand, that there is going to be like slowly being broken down. And that's what Sauron does. Like he has no physical form, so he can't exactly take over these regions. But one way to do that is to
break their spirit.
I subvert is being like used in other ways. I've come to kind of like despise that.
It's almost like a bad word now.
It's almost like a bad word now, but literally subvert. Basically, almost like subterfuge in a way, pretty much to weaken men's minds and wills.
Yeah, the psychological warfare.
Yeah, but once he's able to return, like it's almost like he can just easily take over. So.
Right, because he's already basically won. He just hasn't won physically yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember like we didn't read through all of the histories of Middle Earth and stuff, but a lot of them it was a lot of fun. Have you read through all of the histories of Middle Earth or some of them?
Not all of the histories of Middle Earth. I have Silmarillion, and I started like some of the Unfinished Tales. Because I'm trying to find copies of them, pretty much that aren't. Well, the Lord of the Rings has the stupid Amazon fucking covers. But I'm like trying to find. I want to like go through like thrift books and sites versus Amazon to try to find them. And like most times,
I got most of mine at Barnes and Noble.
So I the closest Barnes and Noble is actually next to the mall that I was telling you about that my grandfather worked on, so I'd have to go out that way to go.
Well, I guess I really like where I live because there's like a Barnes Noble over there. There's a thrift shop like that has books that way, and then another book thrift shop over there. And I'm just like, I just go in. I'm like, okay, I'll take all these books for $5. Yes, please.
That's what.
Or if I can't find it,
that's what I would love. That's like part of the reason why. It's like if I could, like move in, like not necessarily ideally, like move anywhere like close. It would be in that area where the mall is, because there is a Barnes and Noble, there's half price books, there's like a shopping area and so forth. It's like all right there, pretty much.
It's
Nice.
very convenient.
It's not convenient now, and that's mainly because I don't know what it is about one lane roads, like one lane each direction, but no one wants to go the speed limits. And you're stuck and you can't pass because it's the solid lines. And
yep, or a tractor.
Yeah.
I remember living in the country and there'd be a tractor. It's like, well, this is a solid line. I'm just going to be stuck here for the next 10 years.
Because like, knowing my luck, if I were to try to break the law, that's when some like cop on the side of the road would see me. So
whoa, and then just pull you over. It's like, are you serious?
Every other time you're not there, but the one time I break the law, you're there.
Yes. It reminds me, when I was in college, I was going home to Alabama, and there's like a big stretch between let's see, Huntsville and Birmingham, like almost an hour, where it's like 100 miles of just nothing, and it's just straight away. And so like me and my friend were going to see some of my family for, I think it was spring break, and I wasn't paying attention, and I was going like 90 and 100 and a 75, and I'm like, oh no, there's a cop. And then we got pulled over. And there would have been 3 people that passed me, which is why I didn't think about looking at the speedometer, because I was like, oh, there's like people passing me. Apparently they go on like 150, but they didn't get pulled over.
No, yeah, that's the luck, pretty much. That's the luck. So, but it is what it is.
Yup.
Yeah, so anyway, I live around there because, like I said, like, there's a half price books in the Barnes and Noble, so I could go in and actually find these things, but not easy. And then like I said, I like to use thrift books because I like to get sometimes you can find classic covers, like books with like the more classic covers on sites like that, which is what I prefer versus like printings nowadays. So.
Oh yeah, I especially the Lord of the Rings. Like I have a copy on my Kindle, and they switched over to all of the Rings of Power covers, and I wanted to throw my Kindle out of the window and smash it to pieces because I was so upset. I was like, "No, don't change my cover!"
I know. It's absolutely nothing to do with Lord of the Rings at all.
Yeah, which we will get into that, because we do have a couple of articles about Rings of Power. Does it bother you as much as it bothers me that every single time somebody talks about Rings of Power, they have to go, Lord of the Rings of Power?
I actually, whenever I would cover articles, I like, even with doing videos, not just live streams, I would stop and go, like, I am not saying that. Like, it has nothing to do with Lord of the Rings. And so I would stop myself going through, like, as I'm going through the article. As soon as I got to the title, it's like, just the Rings of Power.
Sometimes I do slip up, but yeah, I more or less do the same thing. I'm like, it's Rings of Power. We don't need this extra long title, that's like 17 words, like, just if you want it to be part of the Lord of the Rings, just put the acronym, the LORTH, whatever, instead of saying the Lord of the Rings. Like, no, 1, you're not part of the Lord of the Rings. 2, gosh dang it, that's a long title for anyone to say in any article.
It's a long title, and it's like, even if this weren't like pure studio fan fiction, again, the Second Age covers millennia upon millennia. It's a long time, so it's like the only time it ever really comes close to connecting at all to what happens in Lord of the Rings, it's near the end of the Second Age.
Mm-hmm. And that's not even half of the book. Like when it gets after, like when it starts talking about the beginning of the Third Age, is like a couple chapters maybe, and it's like a brief summary of, okay, these are the events that happen that lead up to The Hobbit, basically.
Yeah. That's about it. And it covers, like, I'll show, because I think, like, I have the Lord of the Rings book, and it shows the timeline. And again, all I had to do was just follow the timeline. They wanted to do that, but
I know, right? It's like, that's so hard.
So Second Age.
I hated it when they showed these in the trailers for the Rings of Power. I'm like, you liars.
Yeah, very much. But year 1, pretty much, Second Age, as it goes, like, the timeline. And the total years for the Second Age is 3,441. So nearly 3,500 years. Cover for the second age. And I'm like, okay, fine. You don't have the rights to anything in the second age, but you have the rights to the appendices, which includes the timeline. And you couldn't even get that right.
Yup. Like, just the basic timeline, and you're just like, what? Like,
yeah, because I was watching the series, and I'm like,
you're a better person than I am. I got to episode 3, and I yeeted out.
I watched the entire series because I did like non-spoiler reviews, and then I basically tore it to pieces on like a spoiler live stream the day after, pretty much, because it released. I think it released well, technically the Thursday, but I would watch it the next day because I would sail the high seas. I wasn't clicking anything on Amazon, so I had to wait until like the next day to be able to download it and then watch it, and then do a review. And I did the entire series, and I nearly punched my monitor.
See, you're a better person than I am, Mara. You are a better woman than me.
When they gave the explanation for Mithril, I was like, are you shitting me?
Oh man, you are a better person. I got to episode 3, and I was like, hold up, what's happening with Dark Elf and Human Lady that nobody cares about? You're telling me this? What? What about Galadriel and her 6-handed sword?
I love how Galadriel's the text would say northernmost, okay, like when it's with Galadriel and her band of merry men or whatever you want to call them, and like the most part of that means that you can't go any farther north. And what she want to do? She wants to continue north. I'm like, and you have these elves watching a region of people that actually worship Sauron. Why aren't you down there?
Right?
I'm like, look at them, like, why are you up north?
I think they were probably because Morgoth's last known location was, of course, up north, and I'm forgetting the region now. What is it called? Morgoth's kingdom or whatnot, which by that time would have gone it wouldn't exist.
He was no more at that point. Like at least at that point where they are supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was no more. So, and the only because she's not. I mean, she's made it clear that she's not going after Morgoth. She's going after Sauron,
which I don't understand because at this point in time, Sauron to most of the world is he's a Morgoth's underling. It's okay, he's probably around, but he's not a threat. He's just an underling, like the Balrogs, and they've gone into hiding. Why are you actively seeking out Sauron?
I never got that. The only thing I got was that because her brother died, and they basically bastardized her brother. Why am I blanking on his name?
Gil-galad? No. Faramir. Fenrir. No.
It's another F one. Fuck.
There are so many F words, or not the F word, but so many F names.
I'm gonna freaking kick myself.
Feanor?
It's not Feanor. She hates Feanor.
Right.
Feanor. Come on. F's. Give me the F's. I'll recognize the name when I see it.
I love how we're both looking over this name. This is one of the most important characters in all of Tolkien's lore, and we can't remember his name.
I can't remember his freaking name.
Let's see.
I think it's Fanrir.
It's either Fenrir or it's all. He names all of his sons F names too. I'm just like, why do you hate us so much?
Finrod.
Because there's Fingolfin, Fingod, Fenrir.
I'm looking through it, Finrod. I'm like, I know his name.
So for any of you watching this back, it's wait, I thought these two were supposed to know what they're talking about with Tolkien. There's 15 F names in the first part of the series.
I just know Feanor, she hates Feanor. She despises Feanor. So she wouldn't because he was the one that was basically gung ho about going after Morgoth.
Right.
And but Finrod Felagund, all right, so he's and
then
they butcher his character again. Okay, aesthetic wise, why did they give elves short hair? I have no idea.
that makes no sense.
They're supposed to stand apart from men, pretty much. That's why, like, whenever you see them, especially in the Peter Jackson, like they have long hair because they stand
They're
apart
supposed
from
to be
men.
angelic because they're the like besides the Maiar and the what's the one above the Maiar?
Valinor,
The Valar, the Maiar.
Valar,
They're
yeah.
like the next closest thing to gods, and so they were supposed to be slightly more ethereal.
They're the children of Iluvatar, pretty much. Like they are literally the children of Iluvatar because like they were created essentially in his image. So they are, because of just that reason alone, they are supposed to stand apart from humans. And technically, dwarves were awoken first because
someone got eager and impatient and wanted to make his own humans to play with.
Yes, so technically the dwarves were awoken first, and I like the story because when Iluvatar, well, it wasn't Iluvatar, but the Valar was ready to smite his own creation, but Iluvatar stopped him because Iluvatar saw the dwarves recoil in fear, which told him they were sentient. They were able to think and process, like, and they were able to understand that they were about to be killed. So he stopped.
Well,
he stopped it from happening. But he said, I have to put them to sleep because they cannot be awake first. He yells at like my children have to be awakened first, pretty much.
Right, because they're called the firstborn for a reason. And then men come in somewhere. I love how the books are just like, and men kind of come around at some point in time. They're just there.
Because it was Aule who. That's why, like, whenever you hear the dwarves and Rings of Power by Aule's beard, and like, but that is the Valar that created the dwarves.
I always
Aule's beard. I'm like, oh my god, he's.
Why do the women dwarves not have beards? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But I'm saying, like, oh my god, you're pretty much talking about a demigod right now, like an archangel. Stop it. Like the Valar, like, because if you read, for those who are watching this, if you read the beginning of the Silmarillion, it pretty much reads like the War in Heaven. Like you very much see Tolkien's how much his Catholic upbringing meant to him.
Yeah, his Catholicism shines in the first parts of the Silmarillion, which I like. We talked about this on my stream last week about C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, and how like Tolkien says he doesn't like allegory because C.S. Lewis is all about the allegory and kind of very on the nose. But also like Tolkien, come on, you've got the creation story here. It's pretty. Come on, this is a little allegory-ish.
A little allegorical. I get that because because people want to connect like certain historical events to like the Hobbit, and like for the Hobbit with the Battle of the Five Armies, it's like people want to connect what happened in World War I to that particular part in the book because of Tolkien's experience in the trenches and World War I just in general, and how he nearly died at times during World War I. And then people want to connect World War II to the Lord of the Rings because of like certain themes. And like, yeah, I can see that, but at the same time, it's like it's not so much allegorical, but more just inspiration.
There's a difference between allegory and inspiration because, like, of course, he's going to talk about his life events. Like, he's going to draw from his life that he's had and the experiences he's had. Like, if he knows warfare, like, firsthand, he's going to write what warfare was like when he was in it.
Yeah, it's because, like, like with the Hobbit, I'm not saying this is a theme or anything to take from the Hobbit pretty much, but how futile it was. Like World War I, pretty much you have these world powers, like these countries itching to go to war. All they needed was one excuse, and it was the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand, pretty much. But they were already gunning. So it's the Battle of Five Armies. They just needed one reason, and the one reason was pretty much the Lonely Mountain. And what did it achieve? Nothing. Like just death and just.
And they ended up working together anyway afterward.
And then like you have the inspiration from World War II, and there's like sometimes good men have to stand against evil, pretty much. So sometimes it's not futile, because if you don't, evil will flourish. So.
And then compare that to the Rings of Power, and Galadriel is making out with Sauron. Like, where is that in the book?
She literally friend zoned Sauron. That's essentially that scene.
And that's why Sauron goes to destroy all of Middle Earth now.
He got friend zones.
I mean, like, his actual reasoning is kind of still that simple. He's like, I want to bring back Morgoth, which to me, like, if I'm second in command and my first in command dude is like gone, I'm like, okay, I'm top dog. I don't want to bring back the other guy. Like, what? Which, I mean, I'd rather the original reason why he wants to take over all of Middle Earth than the new one. But they're still, like, as far as reasons and thought process, I feel like they're kind of on the same level. Like, you got friend zoned.
Yeah. Well, it makes more sense. Like, like we're coming from the perspective, and like, why would you want to bring back the boss? Pretty much, now you're the boss. You don't want to necessarily bring him back, but Sauron was actually toyed with being forgiven by Iluvatar before he like turned around and said, no, screw you. I'm going to. It's like essentially the better to rule in hell than serve in heaven. Pretty much was like literally the mindsets of Morgoth and Sauron.
Mm-hmm. And I always thought that was funny because like he had the opportunity to not be thrown into the pits of darkness forever, and he's like, nah, fam, I'm gonna go with the big guy over there.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
The one who's already been defeated, but I feel like he's gonna win later on, so I'm gonna go with him, even though I know he's not. But still, because like they were all there, they were all witness to. Okay, Iluvatar said like, okay, there's going to be great battles. This is going to happen, where there's going to be this giant battle in the end, and then you're going to be defeated. And so, like, I guess for me, I've never understood, like, if I know my dude's gonna lose, like, I don't want to be on the losing side. I'd be like, nah, fam, I'm gonna go with the guy who created all of us, who can tell me what to do, even if I don't want to do it. Like, come on, y'all.
So, I mean, yeah, I know. I get it. But it's like, it pretty much, like I said, it pretty much flows with the war in heaven from the Bible, pretty much. So it's like you look at that going, like, God is pretty much telling you that you're going to be like tortured and like it's like not going to be good for the rest of your life. But hey, more power to you.
I mean, you can have a little fun for a little bit. Sure, like go on ahead for a little bit, and then
agony and despair and just torture. But if that's your game.
It's like, hey, we've got really cool t-shirts, but that t-shirt's not gonna last you more than 2 years, but it's a really cool t-shirt. And you're like, yeah, like, no, I don't want this t-shirt if it's only gonna last 2 years.
No.
That's how I've always felt about like some of the good and bad things, like in just different fantasies. It's like, I feel like there should be a better reason to turn to the dark side. But some of the reasons I'm like, man, a kindergartner could have come up with something better than that. Except for that's no diss on Tolkien. Like,
yeah.
I just find it funny that like most of the time evil is very simple. It's like, oh, you just want to be the big dog. And so you're going to
like Tolkien's credit is that simple. They just basically just desire power and whatever it takes to achieve it.
And so they just might win, even though we all know they're not.
So it's like that. It's like that tunnel vision of wanting to control and have like basically dominion over everything else. So sometimes it is that simple. Sometimes it is that simple with evil. Pretty much, it's like just wants to destroy whatever is good. That's it.
And then in the Rings of Power, he just wants to destroy everything because a girl says no.
because a girl said, "Nah, fam."
Like, you kind of creepy, bro. I don't do the creep factor. But also, I guess for me, I was so upset. Like, Sauron was supposed to be an elf. Like, he's supposed to become like Anatar, the Lord of Gifts. Like, he's an elf. What? Why is he a human? None of the other elves would have taken him seriously to make the elven rings of power. The dwarves wouldn't have taken him seriously either.
No, I get them not being able to use the Anatar name because Anatar is not mentioned in the appendices. So they would not have been able to use the name because they don't have the rights to any of the Second Age books, pretty much. So they couldn't use anything from the Silmarillion or what have you. But they still could have made him an elf.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like there's no. I'm looking at this going. There's no way the elves are going to listen to a human. Like, I don't care how. Like what tipped me off that I can't even remember the bastard's name. I can't even remember the character's name. That's how much like this like made an impression on me. But what tipped me off that he was like, oh, that's going to be Sauron.
Hellbrand is his name now.
Hellbrand. Yeah, because it was
What
when
kind of name is
he
that?
talked about being a forger, and I'm like, oh shit. All right, they're going that way. All right, but like again, elves wouldn't have like. They would definitely not have listened to him. Like you point out, dwarves wouldn't even listen to him either, pretty much.
When it comes to crafting metal, humans don't live long enough to perfect the skill. Like, it takes hundreds of years to perfect the crafting skill, the smithing skill.
How are you figuring this out? You're only 30.
Right? I'm like 500 years old. How are you figuring this out, whippersnapper?
Yeah, pretty much. And Celeborn of the elves is a master forger. Like he's the one that should have been friend of the dwarves. He is the friend of the dwarves. The dwarves are like they taught him pretty much everything he knew about forging. So like you look up images of Celeborn and you get the well, a bit more buff than I think elves should be, pretty much, but actually forging, but that's what Celeborn was. And then you turn him into an old man. Looked like he
was also he's supposed to be like a love interest. Well, he's into Galadriel, which is kind of weird because that's his aunt.
Technically Celeborn is he's younger than Galadriel, and I'm not
a lot.
Yeah,
so at least a few hundred years.
Yeah, but they cast an actor that is obviously older than the actress in the role, and he looks like
creepy old uncle.
Mrs. Doubtfire play.
Yeah, like that. Galadriel, like by the time of the Second Age, she's thousands upon thousands of years old. Like she's hit her adolescent. Like she has a kid. She's married. Like, what are you talking about? Like, and then we've got this other dude who's supposed to be like hundreds of years younger than her in this series. Like, well, like I said, I only got to episode 3. Does he try and hit on her at all, or is that just
to their credit? No, at least they didn't show that in the first season. Would have been strange. But like I said, he's supposed to be younger than she is, and
yep, she's supposed to be,
and he is a badass, like Finrod. He is actually a badass. Like they make the elves look like
dainty little. Prissies.
Like dandies almost, and it's like I'm not every elf was a warrior pretty much or anything like that. I get that because you have to have the diplomats and the politicians like those and things like that, but there were elves that could fight.
Well, like the elves, since they left Valinor, like they have been fighting the orcs, sometimes humans, the forces of Sauron, the forces of Morgoth. Like this is coming off of the heels.
Even other elves, pretty much. Like they've they've been
the Night of Tears.
So like they can fight, but there are ones that are just in terms of personality, like actual warriors. Elrond was actually the commander of the armies, not Galadriel. Elrond was the commander of the army, so he was the one who was like he becomes like more like a general, pretty much, like closer to the Third Age when we had the last alliance of the men and elves. But he's the one that Gil-galad will turn to. It's like, okay, I need you to go here, track here because we have this dispute or like this uprising, things like that. So he would send Elrond, not Galadriel, pretty much. And then
And like Gil-galad, he was like, I feel like Sauron is making his way here. It wasn't Galadriel, it was Gil-galad. He's like, hey y'all, something's not right. We need to figure this out. Like, and they just completely invert his character in like just the first few episodes, and I was upset. Like, you made him seem like
they even made him like duplicitous because of, like, you know, what they did with altering the importance of Mithril in Tolkien's lore, pretty much, and they tied it somehow to the elves' existence on Middle Earth. And I watched, that was the episode, because also I think that's the episode that also included the Belrog, like the member berries Belrog, pretty much. And I nearly punched my monitor while I was watching it. But I'm watching this thing going, Mithril has absolutely nothing fucking to do with the elves. The only thing that it has anything to do with the elves is that the elves think it's pretty.
Like, this was a dwarven creation, man.
It was a dwarven
Give
creation.
the dwarves their credit.
And all the elves cared about was, oh, it's pretty in jewelry and over door frames and things like that. That's like the only connection it would have to the elves. It was pretty much just a strong metal that the dwarves were able to craft into their armor and so forth. So like whenever Frodo has that mithril, you know, chainmail, like it's strong.
Mm-hmm.
It is very
It stops
strong.
arrows.
Yeah. So, but that was the dwarves' creation, or at least like they were able to, they basically dug it up,
refined it,
things like that. But it was entirely the dwarves, but nothing at all to do with the existence of elves, pretty much. But that's what they did with Rings of Power. They tied to the existence of elves, and they made Gil-galad basically a duplicitous dick. And the reason why he sent Elrond, because they gave Elrond the Friend of the Dwarves title, took that away from Celeborn.
Well, also, like, that was, Galadriel was living with the elves at that, or the dwarves at that time with her daughter, because her husband was off doing something. I forget what he was doing at the time. But, like, she and him had a disagreement about, like, he hated the dwarves, and she's like, no, they're going to be our friends. Like, I'm going to go, like, spend some time with the dwarves. And her husband's like, no, man, not fam. I hate the dwarves.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, she has a daughter.
I think I'd have to find this part in the Silmarillion, but Iluvatar, like when, like it was a story I was telling about how the dwarves were awakened first, and then Iluvatar basically put them to sleep so the elves could awaken first. Like as part of that, there was a prophecy that Iluvatar stated about the elves and the dwarves. I can't remember what it was.
I'm looking at my copy of the Silmarillion. It was early on, wasn't it?
It was pretty early on. I remember reading it. Okay, here it is, right here. I actually put the freaking bookmark right there in that place. Oh my god!
You're a smart person. I'm just over here like I'm just gonna use the table of contents and just keep flipping until I feel like I've got it.
Okay, this is Iluvatar speaking, because like Aurele was ready to smite the dwarves with his hammer, and Iluvatar stops him. Right. But Iluvatar spoke again and said, "Even as I gave being to the thoughts of the Ainur, at the beginning of the world, so now I have taken up thy desire and given it to a place therein. But in no other way will I amend thy handiwork, and as thou hast made it, so shall it be. But I will not suffer this, that these should come before the firstborn, namely the elves, of my design, nor that thy impatience should be rewarded. They shall sleep now in the darkness under stone, and shall not come forth until the firstborn have awakened upon earth. And until that time thou and they shall wait, though long it seem. But when the time comes, I will awaken them, and they shall be to thee as children, and often strife shall arise between thine and mine, the children of my adoption and the children of my choice."
Mm-hmm.
So basically, like, I remember there was a prophecy there from Iluvatar saying, like, that often there will be strife between thine and mine.
Mm-hmm. And like at one point in time, I remember, I think it was during the story of Beren and Luthien, where like one of the dwarves that kind of they take over his, I forget his name, they take over his little hovel, and like he's like, you know, I hate elves, but I hate you guys less. You know, it's like the dwarves never liked men; they just liked men more than they hated the elves.
Yeah. It's like I hate them, and I'll tolerate you. So it's like, you know, it's like, so, but like again, just like the races, every one of the races at one point hated another one. So it's like for people thinking like, so for the Rings of Power at all showing any of these races working in harmony, at least during the Second Age, I'm like, okay, cute, real cute. Yeah.
Right. Like, especially if you're talking about this, the time of Beren and Luthien, like all of that craziness going down. Like, there were elves that hated each other. There were a section of dwarves that hated each other too. And then there were men that hated each other. Like, there were civil wars between the three main races going on anyway.
Galadriel hated Feanor. So whenever she was wearing this armor, when she was in Numenor, that looked like it had Feanor symbol on it, I was like, she would never wear that.
No, she hates him because he's the reason they can't, like, the Noldor elves can't go back to Valinor. He's the reason they were exiled. She did follow him, like, she willingly followed him and made her own choices because she wanted to be a ruler of her own area. And then she's like, actually, that was a bad idea.
Yeah. Pretty much. But like if you would never wear anything remotely associated with them, and he was another elf, so it's like.
Well, also like the Night of Many Tears, where he literally slaughtered the Sylvan elves, right? Sylvan.
It was actually because Galadriel's father and mother. Oh my god, but it was between elves, and it wasn't Sylvan, but it was
the Teleri.
Yeah, Teleri, and I can't remember. But it's
so it should be under the Flight of the Noldor.
Yeah, it was, and it pained Galadriel because her father, her father and mother were like one of each that were fighting pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least I'm not saying that her mother and father were fighting. I'm just saying she comes from both,
right? And she's part god because yeah.
Yeah.
Like people forget that like Galadriel is like half, like she's like a half to a third like Maiar, like, and she also was a handmaiden to one of the Valar. Like, come on, she's like, so she doesn't need to be badass like sword swinging lady because she's a god or a demigod.
I've like never. I was like when they did that, I was like, you're just ruining her character. Like you're literally reducing her to. Like a warrior
girl
elf
boss.
Princess, yeah, like basically a girl boss, pretty much. Where it's like,
yeah, it's the Teleri they swatted.
Yeah. So,
but yeah, I always thought that was funny. It's like if you were to actually look at Galadriel's like story, like because like that was part of when we were going through the histories of Middle Earth. Like we kind of took a deeper dive into Galadriel's backstory because we knew they were going to butcher her character. She's got a very interesting backstory. Like she was very prideful. So like what they could have done is actually just show her backstory. She was very prideful at one point in time, and then she grew up, but she wasn't, like sword swinging warrior person. No, like she was under the tutelage of one of the Valar for millennia, which calmed her down, and she also got married and had a kid around that time too, so that kind of calms you down a little bit. But like she literally went into Middle Earth thinking, I want to rule part of Middle Earth. I want it to be under my dominion. But then when she actually gets the opportunity in not Mirkwood, Lothlorien, where they're like, hey, we'll make you queen, she's like, nah fam, I know what's gonna happen if I do that. And also kind of the final the final act of her redemption story is she's able to resist the ring, because the ring like shows her what she could have been. She could have been the queen of all of it. She could have had whatever she wanted, and she chose not to. And that's like when you look at her story from where she first got into Middle Earth to that point, like she's got an amazing character arc.
Yeah.
But no.
But no, and I say like the same thing is with Celeborn, like what they did to his character, and he meets a extremely horrific death,
gruesome.
Yes, I was trying to find like words, like I wasn't exactly going into details of what happens to him, but he went down fighting. He actually went down fighting and like to protect the city from, because Sauron before the last alliance of elves and men, things like that, he revealed himself. Once the 19 rings were created, and he revealed himself with the 20th ring, right? He would attack these cities. Again, going back to elves were warriors, they were fighters, and they would have to defend the cities, and Celeborn was one of them. And I'm saying like just knowing even how he goes out would have been an epic episode. It would have been depressing to see it because of like his character and so forth, but at the same time it's kind of like Finrod. I don't know if like you went into like anything with his character and how he goes out pretty much, but I think
we did a little bit.
He went out actually saving Beren in a sense because again dealing with Sauron, and not to minimize this, but it was like a battle of song pretty much, and like basically song equals like demonstrates power in Middle Earth, so it's almost essentially the equivalent of a rap battle nowadays pretty much. I'm not trying to diminish it, but that's like essentially what it was.
It's still like it's still funny.
Sauron's trying to figure out who Finrod is. Like he can tell that he's extremely powerful, but he doesn't know who he is. And they were on an island literally of werewolves, and he had to have like each day one man die from werewolves. So basically one of like Beren's men would be taken and eaten pretty much until it was down to just Beren and Finrod. And the werewolf was going to eat Beren, and Finrod literally breaks his chains and
like a badass,
dies in the process, but kills a werewolf with his bare hands.
Like that's an elf. That's an elf in Tolkien's world. Like they're not these dainty little prissy, floaty, ethereal. Like they're ethereal because they're they're the first children of Iluvatar, and they're made in the image of Iluvatar, but that don't mean that they're just little prissy, fancy, robe wearing, tutu prancing little elves. Like, nah, bruh, they gonna fight you.
Yeah. And like I said, like he died in the process. He died from his wounds in the process, but he saved Beren, like literally with his bare hands. He had no weapons because they were imprisoned. That's all he could use.
And that's when Beren loses his hand, right?
I can't remember.
Or is that after
he loses his hand or not? But there is as part of like tracking down the jewels, pretty much, and then like that's why they were captured. Yeah,
like the title of the which. They don't mention the Silmarils in the series, correct? They can't, right?
Yeah, I don't remember. Like I said, I've basically just gone from my mind, but
that's fine.
Since they couldn't touch anything in the Second Age unless it's mentioned in the appendices, then they can't mention it in. Which I can't remember if they do or not.
That's the whole reason the elves come to Middle Earth. The Noldor elves come to Middle Earth to take back the Silmarils from Morgoth. And so I feel like when you leave that out of the story, because it's such a huge part of like the foundation for all the other stories, like it's
I just want to see if it's mentioned in the gloss, like anything here, because that'll tell me that they had been able to mention the name or not. Because if it's in the appendices, then they would have been able to mention them, but I can't remember if they were or not.
I feel like they would have been, but if I could easily be wrong. Because I know there
are Great Jewels 1034. Let's see if it's in the appendices. Yeah, it's in the Appendix A. So if they had the right to the appendices, which they do, they would have been able to mention Silmarils. Because it's in Appendix A. I'm not saying that they did necessarily, but then I repressed it from my mind. But they would have been able to mention it just because it was mentioned in Appendix A of
because I know the whole point of the Silmarils being made was for Galadriel, kind of. Like he made them so they could look like Galadriel, and he used the light of the trees and whatnot. But and also Celebrimbor is like, hey, can I have a lock of your hair too? And she's like, what is with y'all with my hair, man?
Pretty much.
I always love how it's like, you're so beautiful. Can I have your hair? And it's like, Pam, why? But like, also you have to understand her hair still is imbued with power from the two trees at the beginning of creation.
So when she gives Gimli 3 locks of her hair, like that's actually a big deal for her to
He's
do
basically getting a taste of creation in his hand.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. Like a dwarf. Like a dwarf who shouldn't have even existed in the Tolkien universe, quote unquote, gets a piece of creation.
Yeah. So I'm saying, like, people, like, it's like I'm trying not to say this as a dig at normies, but like, normies watching the movie goes, oh, that's sweet, and we're sitting there going, like, she just gave him pretty much like a gift from God, almost.
Like, which is what, like, you understand why her husband's just like, you gave him what?
Yeah.
What did you give him? Because he knows the significance.
Yeah. which again, like, to bring up Rings of Power again, they're going to have to explain the miraculous recovery of Celeborn, because according to season 1, he's dead. Like, she actually brings him up in an episode. It's the episode after she gets blasted in the face with the volcanic, right in the face with the
Cheeto dust.
Blast. Yeah, and she's talking to the son of the human woman, and she mentions, I think she even mentions her daughter, not really by name, but she mentions her husband. Like, she mentions her husband. I know she definitely mentions her husband, but she says that he's dead. Yes.
What?
Yes. Like,
what? Yes. How does he get zombified?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They're going to have to explain his miraculous recovery and
he's a Lazarus now. He just raises himself from the dead.
Because like when she said that, I was like, then how did he get from wherever to Lothlorien in the Third Age, where we see him literally standing next to you when the Fellowship arrives?
Maybe that's his twin brother that nobody knew about, that like it has the same name and looks exactly the same.
It's like they turned it into a soap opera. It's like, he's like, I am so and so's twin. And you have like the dramatic music happen.
Da, 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 da. See, we're coming up with better stuff than what they're coming up. Like, dude, it would, like, granted, I'm sure Tolkien would be rolling in his grave at the idea that I'm about to spit out, but it would still be funny if we had a Lord of the Rings parody where it was just about like making fun of stuff like that. It's like, well, Galadriel's actually married, but her husband hates the dwarves, and so she's gonna go shack up with the dwarves for a little while.
Pretty much.
Which is what happens. She takes her daughter and she goes and shacks up with the dwarves while her husband's like, adios for a little bit. And nobody has a problem with that. I always have a problem. Like, wait, you're just going to let your wife just be around the door? Your ethereal part god wife.
His wife could probably smite him because she is a bit more powerful than he is.
Yes, she definitely married down, if we are being correct.
I love Celeborn, but she's a bit more powerful than he is.
Like, not only is she part god, she got tutelage from a god.
Yes. So I don't think he'd stand a chance, no matter how much she loved him.
Which I was like, any disagreement is like, I'm just gonna do what I want to do, and he's just like, okay,
yeah,
I'm gonna go over here.
Happy wife, happy life. I'll just go over here.
That there is not a truer statement for that man.
I was like, it works for him.
Because she literally, like, there were, I remember reading, I think it was in the Unfinished Tales, where she literally brings an entire army to another continent in like less than a day because of a fog, so they can get to their battle in time. Like, she just like, okay, you're just gonna get transported over there. Like, what?
Yeah. It still made more sense than her swimming like the entirety of a channel or whatever it was, sea. Because she literally jumped off the boats. She's about ready to enter the gates of heaven, literally, and she jumps off the boat and decides to swim her way back to Middle Earth. And I'm like, okay.
She must have had some great swimming lessons or something.
I'm just like, like the distance is like a whoo. But like, you know, it's like,
why are there no like sharks? Where I want to know, where is Olmo? Like, did Olmo like lift her up and like take her? Which he hates the elves. He hates specifically the Noldor elves because of what they did to the Teleri. Because the Teleri are like his elves because they love each other. It's kind of this weird thing. Like what? Like,
no Olmo. So like she wasn't carried. She just swam and somehow happened upon the only raft, small boats in the middle of this sea, which had Hellbrand on it and a bunch of other people from whatever. Like you're supposed to believe whatever Hellbrand tells her, pretty much that happens. And they encounter the one sea creature in the entirety of the sea that goes after the raft that somehow does not eat Hellbrand and Galadriel. Eats everyone else, but those two survive. It's like they got through like 5 people, and I'm like, okay, I'm full. You guys can go.
Like, bro, like Olmo would never have let them. Like, if she had jumped off, he'd have been like, "All right, this is your fate. You're going to now drown." Because Olmo hated everybody else besides like the people who loved water. Like, yeah, he would kill people just like, "Oh, you don't like what I'm doing?" Like, boop, you don't drown.
Yeah, like they don't even like I said, they don't even mention Olmo that I remember. The only Valar that they mention is from the dwarves, and that's Owlay. So.
What about Tolkas? Like he's so awesome. Like he actually takes on like Melkor, and
they don't.
There's so many cool Valar.
This is studio fiction. Like this, like the showrunners literally came out and said that they were going to write the story that Tolkien never did. Like they were going to tell the story Tolkien never did.
Because this shouldn't have been written.
Yeah, no, like they were like going to connect the dots that Tolkien never did, and I'm like, he didn't have to because he created the dots. All right, and we can figure out how to get from one dot to another without your help. Thank you very much. So
right, I feel like what Rings of Power actually, like as far as actuality, is normies creating a series based on what they know from the movies.
Yeah, like I don't know. The showrunners kept claiming that we're going back to the book. We're going back to the book, and I'm like,
how can you when you don't have the
you have
source
the right
material
to Lord of the Rings, so like you only have the right to the Third Age stuff. Which why would you be talking about anything from the Third Age? Because you're focusing on the Second Age, so it makes no sense. And 2, you only have the rights to the appendices. So what book are you talking about?
Right? Like it doesn't make sense.
No. And again, like I somehow got through the series. I think doing the live streams afterwards where I break down the spoilers is kind of like the cathartic moments, pretty much, where it's like I was able to like just get everything off my chest. So I think that's how I was able to get through. Like if I wasn't able to rant at all about it on a stream, even I probably would have gone crazy. Like I wasn't able to do it this time with the Last of Us series, just because of like scheduling and everything. I wasn't able to do it, but I checked out of that series because I wasn't.
Episode 3. Episode 3. That's all. For some reason, like for me, it's like episode 3, and it's like if it doesn't episode 3 is kind of that crux for me. It's just like if it's usually where it goes to trash. But I still like Last of Us was the one that I choked through.
It was like I made it to 5?
You
5 or
didn't.
6. I want to say 5. And I just like, okay, I'm done. I was bored. I was like bored, silly.
Mm-hmm. I guess also my curiosity is because like Galadriel's daughter marries Elrond. So Elrond is technically Galadriel's like son-in-law.
Yeah.
Why is he speaking to her like he's above her? He's not.
No.
Galadriel can smite every single one of them.
Again, Elrond is younger than Galadriel.
By a lot.
Yes. And 2, again, like they really did not have like any relationship like what they portrayed in the series at all, pretty much. And until like he marries her daughter.
Where is she?
Yeah, I'm saying like but like I read an article a while back that like it's arguably it was Screen Rant. I guess that they are going to introduce Galadriel's daughter in season 2 or something like that, or that's a rumor.
But Galadriel looks like she's 16.
Yeah, no, I'm saying like that's why it's like the casting makes absolutely no sense. I get that elves are going to look ethereal, so they won't look as old as they actually are, but at the same time, it's like I believe Kate Blanchett more as Galadriel than I do a woman that looks like she's like barely out of puberty. Especially when you have the men that like obviously look older than she is, and I'm like, she's supposed to be older than them.
She's supposed to be older than just about it. Like by the time the rings are made, she's just about the oldest being besides Gil-galad on all of Middle Earth.
Yeah, I'm saying, but like, you watch the series and it's like what should be one way. At the very least, at least the men should look a little bit younger than her because of how much older she is, with the exception of Gil-galad, and even then he's slightly younger than she is, pretty much. But even then, it's like the cognitive disconnect is just mind-boggling.
Right, it's crazy.
And again, they're gonna have to explain where her daughter's been this whole time. Because she's been out hunting down Sauron, and literally, like, she's the worst mother of the year, pretty much.
Right.
And like abandoning her child to where is she? Like, where did you leave your child? Like, she just like she basically mentions her, if at all, one episode, and then it's like just subsequently forgotten the next episode, and like, but like, why aren't you with your daughter? Why, like, where did you leave her? Why did you leave her?
Who did you leave her with?
Yeah, I'm saying like, it just makes absolutely no sense. Makes absolutely no sense because Galadriel would never abandon her child, nor would she even assume her husband's dead until she actually knew, pretty much.
Right.
Because like again, like she's talking as if like she just heard that he died, like she never saw his body, pretty much. And I'm like, no, Galadriel would make absolutely sure.
Because that's who she is.
And I'm like, but they butchered every character, and then like they even butchered the non-canonical characters that they added for whatever reason. Because
they did. Because why wouldn't they?
You have the Hood Legolas that somehow finds a barber in Middle Earth to give him the perfect fade.
he has a fly fade.
I'm like saying, like, I'm like looking at it, okay, forgetting the fact that, all right, this is not D&D, all right, this is not D&D, all right, like, okay, it's like people were like, oh, you have a problem with Black Elves, D&D does it. No shit, Sherlock, I play that. But this is not D&D, this is Tolkien's world, and he describes elves pretty much to a T, how they look, and this is based on European mythologies like Norse mythology and so forth, pretty much. So guess what? They would not be black. I'm sorry, they would not be black. They would not be dark skinned. Pretty much, they would be more fair skinned.
Unacceptable. You are a bigot, an ist, a phobe.
Yes.
All the other words.
I'm like, they wanted to like do that. I'm saying like make a. I'm really not going to watch the new Dungeons and Dragons movie. I have no desire to watch it because it's based on.
I've actually heard good things about it.
Well, let's put it this way: I might sail the high seas to watch it. I'm not going to pay for it or anything. But I didn't watch it when it came to theaters or anything because, like I said, no desire, and it would be based on the 5th edition rules. So I'm like, pretty much. Maybe I'll out of morbid curiosity at one point I will watch it. But at the same time,
Pathfinder's better.
Like right there, the D&D world is like the perfect place for you to. I don't want to say insert identity politics, but hey, Black Elves, because it happens pretty much.
Because like in D&D, you can do whatever you want. You make your own world, however you see it. You create the world in your image.
Yeah, literally, pretty much literally.
This is not D&D. This is not your image. This is somebody else's image, and you need to stop blaspheming it.
Yeah. So when people were like, "Oh, yeah, like you're just racist" and things like that, and I'm like, it's like no, because like say like with the female dwarf, the beardless female dwarf, like the race watch. I like I did not really have any issue with the actress being dark skinned at all, pretty much, because there are dark skinned dwarves in Middle Earth. They're just not in Moria. There's not a Cause of Doom.
Mm-mm.
So I was like, okay,
They are the
fine.
deep
You can cast
dwarves.
her, but if you're going to cast her, actually be respectful to the lore and have her like be a part of a different sect of dwarves that are actually more dark skinned and live more in the volcanic regions. Because of that, like they develop a darker skin because like where they live. Living underground, guess what? You're not exactly in the sunshine a lot.
It is what it is. Like, you're gonna be pretty pale if you've never seen the sun.
Yeah.
Like,
or you're hardly ever out in the sun because, like, literally, again, they have the rights to the appendices, right? So it says in the appendices that you don't see a lot of female dwarves. They don't travel as much as the male dwarves, but when they do, they have beards. So people assume that they're males traveling, not the females traveling. But they don't,
because you don't know.
Yeah, they don't. But they don't travel a lot. They don't travel as much as their male counterparts. So I'm like literally right in the appendices, right freaking there.
Well, because like Tolkien, like he's very detail oriented about his stories. Like if it's not there, it's not there for a reason.
Yeah.
Like he's very in depth. Like there's a reason it took him like forever to write the Silmarillion, and he wasn't even completely sure it was done. Like even to his dying breath, he was still trying. Like, I don't know if I like that idea. I don't know if I like that idea. Or
he was the consummate perfectionist to the point where he actually drove his publishers nuts because they were like, just give us something, anything, just give us something. But he was like, he kept going back and going, no, I'm not sure about that. So I'm like, maybe if I write it this way, or I'm not like, or if I alter it right here. Like he was like,
well, I mean, in the earliest copies of his story for like even Sauron was a giant cat.
Yeah, so he was
I'm glad he
changing things, and sometimes to the annoyance of his publishers, but for the most part, like you'd have to say, like that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
I'm glad that the elves are not actually gnomes, because at one point in time they were gnomes.
Yeah. No, like I know better that where he ended up pretty much, and actually the Silmarillion was written before the Lord of the Rings, but they wanted something more akin to the Hobbits, so that's why people were like, when people try to do the gotcha moments with Lord of the Rings fans, pretty much like it's like, oh, like this was like Tolkien didn't finish the Silmarillion, like his son Christopher Tolkien did, blah 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 blah, and we're like,
no, he was writing it when he was in the trenches of World War I.
Yeah, so it was written before Lord of the Rings. It might not have been finished completely, but he had it most, like a huge chunk of it's written, that he was ready to publish it because he wanted to publish it first because it's a history of Middle Earth. He wrote one of the histories of Middle Earth, and his publishers wanted to capitalize on the popularity of the Hobbits, so they're like, nah, we're not going to publish this. Give us something more like the Hobbits, and that's how we got Lord of the Rings. I'm not saying that he started writing Lord of the Rings then, but at the same time, it's like, okay, it's like he's had to give that story. And those were published in 54, 55 over roughly a year period. Because they were, they are technically 6 books. But when they were published, they like put 2 books together. So we have the Fellowship, and then 2 together. We have 2 Towers, and 2 together. We have Return of the King. So it became a trilogy essentially, but technically it's 6 books.
Which I mean, I prefer just the 6 books, or the 3 books. I mean, to having like 6 where they're smaller. I feel like it would have been smaller than having the 3 books. So I'm glad they got smushed together. But I also I hate when people are like, well, it's actually 6 and blah blah blah. Like people use that as an argument, like points. Like, come on, y'all. Yeah. Like there's actual reasons to argue about other things. This is not one of them.
Yeah, I'm like, when they argue something like that, I'm like, I know. It's like, where's your gotcha moment in that? What are you pointing out to me that's I don't already know? Like you literally read the books, pretty much it says book 1, boom, book 2. Like it's right there in the text. You can't miss it. You can't miss it when you're reading them.
But I mean, what are we? We're just people on the internet who like Tolkien,
So I
Which
love
I
how
don't know.
everyone's become a Tolkien expert now that Rings of Power is out. You know, all of a sudden people are pointing out like little factoids, and I got blocked by a person on Twitter because I was like, no shit, because I pointed out because he was pointing out like why Sauron chose this and things like that, and like he was talking about Mount Doom, and I'm like, yeah, no shit, and I point out like an article right there, like boom, yeah, and she blocked me.
God.
I
Of
can't remember
course,
what it
of
was.
course.
It was about why he chose Mordor and like the terminology and so forth. And I was like,
Oh, mm-hmm.
and I'm like, and like you go on her like if you go on her profile, all of a sudden she's a Tolkien fan. So
All of a sudden, of course.
yeah,
Like for those of us who've been fans for a while, it's like, fine if you want to be a fan now, but don't talk about like you've been a fan forever and act like you're an authority on it. Like I don't even consider myself an authority on Tolkien. I just like how I came into like the Tolkien world was through C.S. Lewis.
mm-hmm.
And I've said this before on my channel before. Like I found C.S. Lewis before I found Tolkien, but you cannot find Tolkien without finding C.S. Lewis or vice versa because they were like thick as thieves for a while. And we
Yeah.
wouldn't have the Lord of the Rings.
Tolkien was actually converted C.S. Lewis. Like he
Mm-hmm.
was the one like because C.S. Lewis was an agnostic. I want to say before meeting Tolkien, but then they had a falling out because C.S. Lewis converted to the wrong form of Catholicism.
Well, actually, so when I was reading through some of the articles or some of the letters back and forth, what one of the main reasons for the split, like yeah, he converted, but he went to the quote unquote wrong side. But you remember, have you read the first the chronologically first The Magician's Nephew
If I believe I
and
did,
the
but it was
Chronicles of
like years
Narnia?
ago when I was a kid.
So in The Magician's Nephew, there's a couple of magical rings. They do not work any way like the Lord of the Rings, but Tolkien got offended because he's like, you took my idea from me and you did not give me credit for it.
Oh, okay. I didn't know about that. Like I said, it's been
Yes,
years
like
since I
that's
read The Magician's Nephew. I actually started with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe because
mhm.
that's the
Most
book
people
that we
do.
read in school, pretty much. That's like the one that's whenever we were in like our middle school English classes or something like that. It's what they would start with.
Yeah. Well, as far as publication order, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is first publication wise because
Mhm.
the Magician's Nephew is right before the last battle, and the last battle's the last book of the Chronicles of Narnia, and so it was written towards the end of the Chronicles of Narnia series. And so like some people can understand it's like, okay, Lewis, like the Lord of the Rings was already out and published and popular, and then you go and write this prequel that talk about these magical rings. But like if you've read the book, like the rings don't work, and like the rings are for transportation. They are not, you know, they are not imbued with like a sentient being's spirit or anything. They are a tool to be used. But that actually like sparked a lot of heat. Tolkien was like, Lewis, why didn't you give me credit? Because, you know, like I gave you the idea for rings of like for powerful rings that have magical properties, and Lewis is like, this doesn't work anything like your rings. What are you talking about? And so like they were both really petty.
Yeah. I can see. So yeah. So
and
yeah,
then of course that was
up, so
it was agitated by the fact that Lewis did not marry the correct person, or a lot of Tolkien thought that his wife was using him for citizenship or something, and like a lot like they just his theology wasn't agreed with, his marriage wasn't agreed with, and Tolkien's just like, and you took my idea from me. That's the nail, that's the final straw.
I mean, I love Tolkien. Like I love this like questions people ask. It's like if like you had a chance to like talk to this like someone that like that's in heaven, like pretty much who's already dead, like who would you talk to? And part of me would love to talk to Tolkien, but at the same time, part of me like having read like biographies about him, I'm like, I think I might pass just this one time.
Well, one, you're a woman, and he probably would.
I love him, his books. I even love him. Like this biography is like itself is fascinating. If you have a chance to read it, like he was a extremely interesting character. But at the same time, it's like I feel like I don't want the conversation to turn into, have you thought of Catholicism? I don't want to turn into that.
I'm about certain it probably would. Certain, like, are you aware of the Holy Mother Mary?
Yes, like it's like, are you ready to give up being a Lutheran and become a Catholic? I was like,
Yeah, I've read the Tolkien, the biography by Humphrey Carpenter, and then the letters of Tolkien. So I've read a couple of Tolkien's biography and stuff like
yeah.
that. But because I was actually going to ask you a question of like if you could meet Tolkien, what would be the question you'd ask, or what would you say to him?
Well, the question I would ask, like if I were able to meet him, is where his fascination with linguistics comes from. Like, how did like he develop such a love for like languages?
How did you become a philologist?
Yeah.
I like saying that word.
Like he worked on the dictionary, so we have like him
The
to thank
Oxford
for,
Dictionary
yeah,
was
for the
written
Oxford
by
Dictionary.
him.
Yeah. He created his own languages with the Elvish and the Dwarvish. Like, yes, he took inspiration from like other languages, but he did create his own
It's a
language.
certified language that you can take college courses for.
So I'm like, I'm that just fascinates me. Like that he not only that he loved languages, but he also created his own to the point where it's like you can actually like Shelob actually stems from, I believe, older Middle English, like lobe means spider. So it's
The
she
she
spider.
spider.
Yeah. I was like, I became myself fascinated with how he came up with names and the different dialects and so forth for the different races. That's what I would talk to him about. It's like, where did that
Right, because like it's so in depth. Like a lot of people, joke like he wrote the languages before he wrote the stories. It's like I have these languages, I need a story for these languages, because that's how a lot of people think that it happened. Like, or some people say it's like, well, he wrote the language first, and then the story came to fill the language. But the cart before the horse, the egg, the which came first, the chicken or the egg, kind of thing. Like a lot of people aren't 100% certain, but that's one of the theories. Is like he made the language first, and he's like, well, I need to figure out something to do with this language.
I think the Tolkien movie even touched upon that. I'm not saying like it was necessarily accurate or anything, but so like he did like now again like he loved. He's like working on the Oxford dictionary. It's I can't even speak tonight, but you know what the word I'm talk about.
Welcome to my channel where I always the English flows in this channel.
I speak good. I do speak well.
I speak English good.
But like that he like was coming up with different languages based on like it's like his research and everything. So he was coming up with languages, but I think like he basically everything flowed together. So it's not like he created the language first and then wrote the story. I think like he in Tolkien's mind, because like I said, he's a very fascinating character. It all kind of just was like this in his head. Like,
he even wrote part of a like while he was grading a paper, he wrote like there was a hobbit that lived in a hole. Like the first part of the hobbit,
and like boom, like and he was like just like this. I'm so bored. Just flips it over. Just in the hole there lived a hobbit. Pretty much like he's writing.
I would have loved to have been that student. Like, why can't I have my paper back? Well, I've actually started writing my next book.
On your back of it.
Like, you can't have your paper back, dear. Why? Because I'm writing my book on it. That would be amazing, man. Like, imagine being one of his students, and it's like it just so happens like your paper is like, yeah, you'll never have this paper back, and it'll be a historical paper because it's going to be hidden away somewhere as a historical archive of this is when Tolkien actually had the inspiration for his Hobbit book.
Yes,
was my paper.
Did I at least get a B? Like,
right? I've always been curious, like what was the grade for the paper he was grading? Like what happened?
That's what I would wonder too. Is like where like it's like somewhere there's a family that passed down that story because there has to be that student who couldn't get that paper back. It's like it's like I'm the one that he wrote in the hole there lived a hobbit.
I should get credit for it. Gosh dang. There'll be like some family like a few years from now. It's like actually that story was about my great great granddad, and I want my reparations.
Yes. Oh my god. I want my credit.
Give it to me. I want my money. That would
Like,
be
yeah.
amazing.
I got some royalties coming to me. Put my next printing. I want my family's name in the book. Thanks to great. It's like
Right. Bro, if that was me though, I'd seriously, I'd be calling the Tolkien estate and be like, "Excuse me, that's actually my granddad's paper that you talked about in your article. Yes, can I have credit, please?" Because I feel like, yeah, I would do that. I'd be like, "Yeah, that's my great granddaddy right there."
Yeah. Well, I'd be boasting. It's like, I'd
Yeah,
be like,
I'm
I'd be
the
like
one.
on the phone to the Tolkien estates. Like, can I at least get a picture of it?
I want to see what was the grade.
Yeah, like he never got the grade. Can you tell me the grade?
Like he ends up not getting his degree because Tolkien never turned in his
He
paper.
never got the paper back, so he's like,
This poor guy trying to work for his doctorate, and I never knew what happened.
It's like, all I know is I was told I can't have it back.
And he was really happy about it. I guess I did good.
I'll just assume I got an A. He was smiling.
Oh man. I just couldn't imagine like being one of their students. Granted, I don't think at that time Oxford wasn't accepting women yet, right? If I remember, I think
if they were, it's like rare.
Okay.
But mainly Oxford was like basically primarily male
Mhm.
college. University, I should say.
If I had the opportunity, like if I lived another life and I could be a dude and be at Oxford and be under Tolkien, like, bro, I can't imagine the lectures he would have gave. Like, I wonder if he used his own like books as like for his like if he was teaching a philology class, like, you know, language class. It's like, actually language is supposed to work like this. If you'll notice in Elvish here, this pronoun and this adjective go this place, and this is the perfect tense of this verb here. It's like,
I honestly could see him doing that, because like I said, he would actually correct things. It's like he would find, like, even when working on the dictionary, he would find like, you know, something wrong, and he'd correct it because of his extensive knowledge of how language worked, the etymology of certain words, and just all that. So like, again, we have him to thank. Like, growing up, for those of us like, you know, who didn't have the internet or anything like that, who actually had to pull out a thick ass dictionary to look up a word, we have him to thank for that.
Yeah, I actually remember growing up, one of my uncles had like this, I guess it was like a dictionary set. Like, I don't know if like I feel like there's a lot of places that have this old dictionary set that has like A to Z different books, and then it has like an encyclopedia as well. It's like gold cover or something like that. And like, and then the Oxford dictionary's over there too. I never actually used the dictionaries like for their intended purpose. I would just read them. Like, what?
Yeah. My dad was an English major, and it's like, if I asked him, what does this word mean? If I was reading a book, he'd be like, he'd just pick up the dictionary, look it up yourself.
Yeah,
he was all about, if you come across a word you don't know, write it down, write the meaning down, and like find a way to use it. So, so
use it in a sentence.
Yeah, so
I remember
that was my dad, English major.
See, like, I remember in 6th grade, my English teacher, I grew up in South Alabama. They added y'all to the dictionary. And I remember my English teacher, taking all of the new dictionaries out of their boxes, going in with whiteout and whiting out where it said y'all that was added to the dictionary. She's like, this is not proper grammar. Should not be in this book.
I wouldn't use whiteout, but I feel for where she's coming from, because, I can't say how we say you all up here without giving away where I live, pretty much, because anyone who like knows like this expression would pick out exactly where I live.
Guys.
Like, yeah, but I would do the same thing if it was like that word from where, like, you know, where I grew up, like the city ease from where I grew up. I would do this. I would do the same thing, pretty much, or feel the same way. Because like, this is not a fucking word.
like still to this day, it's like ingrained in me. It's just seeing her with all of the different dictionaries in her hand, just marking it out. I'm like, oh, and she's like, if you use that word in my class, I will take points away from your overall grade. And we were just like, like my 12-year-old brain is just like, but y'all is just like part of my DNA. Like, what do you mean I can't say y'all?
At least y'all make sense if like when we're done with the stream and I'll tell you like like the city E's. At least y'all make sense because it's you and all just like kind of like contracted together. You hear you hear like what it means, like the word that we use up here. You're like, where the fuck does that come from?
Well, also like if you go to the deep part of the South, we say all y'all, which makes no sense because y'all all you all, yeah. Basic. If you transliterate it, or some of y'all, it's like all is all.
No,
there's not some of all. There is either some and then there is all. So,
I guess in the deep South,
Tolkien would not be thrilled with the Southern language.
I guess in the deep South, it makes sense. I don't know.
It's well, also in the deep South, everything is a Coke. It's like, what kind of Coke do you want? A Dr. Pepper or a Sprite? Like we say Coke instead of like pop or soda pop. Like my friend from Minnesota, she says pop. And I was like, you mean like Pop Goes the Weasel? Like, what are you talking about, pop?
There was actually, when I was in tech school, there was actually a debate. Like, what do you say? Well, it was actually soda or pop. Like, what do you say? Like, it's like, what is correct? Like, what is correct? And like, and to see, like, based on where everyone came from, what we were used to saying, pretty much.
Yep, we just say Coke. It's like, what kind of Coke do you want? I want a Sprite.
I would actually look at that going, okay, what kind?
When I worked in fast food and we get people from out of state, and I'd be like, what kind of Coke can I get you? And they're like, oh, I don't want Coke. It's like, okay, we've got different Coke products. We've got Sprite. We've got Dr. Pepper. They're like, Dr. Pepper isn't a Coke product. It is in the store. Because Dr. Pepper is like is its own independent thing. And so people are like, it can be Pepsi product or Coke product, but it's technically its own thing. And Dr. Pepper and Mountain Dew flow freely in the South. And sweet tea.
I believe it. I believe it.
Like just funny story time, like the restaurant that I used to work at, we'd make these giant things of sweet tea. And like, they're not like huge giant, like, but we take an entire bag of sugar and dump it in and stir it around. And that's the sweet tea. We call it diabetes tea in the South.
I feel my teeth hurting right now. Like, just like that, like just thinking of like drinking something with a bag of sugar dumped into it.
Oh goodness. So besides the sweet tea talk and the different Southerns talk, what would you say is one of Tolkien's underrated books? In your opinion?
In my opinion, I don't really think many of his books are like considered underrated, but I'd say probably because not too many people know like his other stories. Like I'm like at some point I'm going to read Children of Hurin. Like not a lot of people know that he like of all the other works that he worked, The Fall of Gondolin.
That's one I definitely want to read, as well as the actual story of Beren and Luthien, and then The Fall of Gondolin.
I have Beren and Luthien. That's one I would say pretty much like if you were to talk to anyone, I would say Beren and Luthien is probably the most underrated, just because yes, it's a Middle-earth story, but when people think of Middle-earth, they think of the bigger events and things like that, particularly with the Third Age. So they don't really think of like the I don't want to say lesser story, but like it's like it's kind of like smaller in scale stories that he wrote. And I would say I would put Beren and Luthien up there as probably one of the most, not necessarily the most, but one of the most underrated stories he wrote. Because it's actually brought up without actually giving the names in I believe it's Fellowship of the Ring, because Aragorn is actually reciting the story in poem of Beren and Luthien. And not to be know that.
Yeah, and that's actually, in my opinion, like, well, not really even my opinion, like Tolkien's favorite story out of all of his Middle Earth stories. Like even on his tombstone, like he has for him and his wife, he's got Beren and Luthien on his and his wife's tombstone. So like, in my opinion, like that's actually one of the closest stories to Tolkien's heart.
Yeah, and I don't think too many people realize that that's an actual book that you can get, because most people know know Lord of the Rings from like the movies, like watching the Peter Jackson films and so forth. But in, I believe it's Fellowship, yeah, I believe, because Aragorn is singing about Beren and Luthien, and not too many people realize that that's an actual story. It's not just a pretty song that's part of the text or anything like that. Tolkien actually expanded upon those characters and the significance, like like Beren knew Finrod and things like that. Beren was saved by an elf and so forth. It involves the Cimmerils and everything, so it's like a bigger story than just a human and an elf fell in love, which mirrors Aragorn and Arwen.
But Beren and Luthien came first.
Yes. Yeah. So, but that's what people just associate with. They're like, oh, a human and an elf fell in love. Oh, that's like Aragorn and Arwen. So that's a connection. I'm like, yeah,
In
that's a connection,
actuality, no.
there's more to it than
Some of the
just
crap that Beren had to go through, man. Like getting his hand chopped off.
He couldn't just marry Luthien. He had to go through a lot. Aragorn basically, Elrond is just saying no, but Beren went through hell.
Yeah, and back. He went to literally to the depths of hell and then came back. He's like, I actually lost my hand. I did what you wanted, but my hand is in the belly of the wolf that ate it with the Cimmeril in there, and
yeah,
I can go get it again if you want. Which he does.
So I'm like, it's like a bit more drastic than Elrond just telling Aragorn, yeah, I don't want you to marry my daughter because I don't want her to grow old and die on Middle Earth, pretty much.
So. Which is understandable, because the fate of elves that choose to grow old, so to speak, it's rough. They just kind of cease to exist.
Yeah.
They don't go anywhere.
So I understand, yeah, where Elrond's coming from, because I think Éomer actually married an elf too. So like so she would have chosen to basically stay and just cease to exist. I can't remember what her name was. It's in the appendices, like post the events of the Lord of the Rings. So I believe Éomer married an elf.
I think so. That sounds right.
And I think Aragorn had only one son. I think he primarily had daughters. I think he just had one son.
If I remember correctly, that's how it was. And I always was confused. Like, yeah, I get that, her son isn't her husband and stuff, and like it's technically supposed to be her son's kingdom, but like, why don't you stay alive for your like kids and your grandkids? And she basically dies of a broken heart. Like, I get it. Yes, that's so romantic. Dying of a broken heart, which I will never do, because I feel like that's a cop out. Like, no, move on with your life. I don't know.
We now know I'm saying Mando has a heart of stone. She's like, oh, fuck this broken heart bullshit. Live.
Well, like, I'm married, and like my husband knows, like if he croaks, like, okay, I'll be sad, but I ain't gonna stop like my life, man.
But at least it made sense with Arwen, other than not Padme that died from sadness.
Oh my god!
At least it made sense with Arwen. At least it made more sense.
Yeah, but like, just on that trope of, oh my gosh, Anakin, I'm going to die without you. It's like, no, fam, I've got another life I can live without you. It's sad that you're dying, but I'm gonna go over here and do my thing. So yeah, if that is that heartless? Probably. Am I gonna live longer than most other people? Probably.
Yeah. There is if you want to like watch something that's really funny, I'm blanking on the comedian's name, but look up "Survived by His Wife." It's what's his name? Hold on, I gotta look it up real fast. On YouTube.
Alan King?
Alan King, yes, thank you. Alan King. He does a segment called "Survived by His Wife," and because like the reason why he did the segment was because a woman got upset with at a joke that he did in like another stand-up, pretty much, because he's a comedian, and he said, women live longer than men because women aren't married to other women. That was a joke, pretty much. So a woman got upset at that, and so the next routine he did, he brought out these obituaries. And it's called Survived by basically the video is called Survived by His Wife, because he's going through the crowd and going, read that last part there. Survived by his wife. Survived by his wife.
Some people kind of wonder, does that mean that, the wife,
there's a really funny one in there that kind of like you kind of hit close to what happened in one of the obituaries, but it's hilarious. I don't want to say anything because it's hilarious, but if you look up and watch Survived by His Wife, it's hysterical.
Yes. That sounds funny. I've watched some comedians, like one of my favorites, Jeff Dunham.
Oh yeah. The blue collar comedy. Yeah.
Yeah. And for any of you who are going to watch this back and be like, who's Jeff Dunham? Just look up Peanut.
Oh, yeah, that one. I have a coin somewhere of Ahmed the Dead Terrorist when I was in Afghanistan. I think it was when I was in Iraq or Afghanistan. I can't remember. But certain squads or units get coins, and I remember looking at it going, I really like that, and the guy, one of the guys that we would work with gave me. And the other girl won, and somewhere I have it as Ahmed the Dead Terrorist on it. And as my mom, I grew up watching blue collar comedy with Jeff Foxworthy and Bill Engvall and things like that. Ron White. One of my favorites is Ron White stand up where he talks about how his wife. It took a while for her to figure out that the smoke alarm wasn't a timer.
Oh no. Yeesh. Oh,
Yeesh.
No.
Yes. His routines were I died at some of them.
Yeesh. All right. Let's see. I have more or less one last character. If you could meet anyone in Middle Earth at any point in time, who would you meet and why?
Any character at any point in Middle Earth. There are so many characters. So many characters. Part of me wants to say Celebrimbor, because he was a fascinating character. He again, butchered in Rings of Power, but
yup.
Friends with dwarves at a time when there was actually animosity and strife between the races. He was actually taught by the dwarves how to be a master forger, and to take those skills back and he's the one who created. He was tricked into creating the One Ring of Power, but unbeknownst to Sauron. Yes, I was unbeknownst to Sauron, he created the 3 Elvish rings. So he was because he didn't entirely trust Anatar. There's something about this guy that I do not trust. So I'm going to create these 3 rings of power in secret. So
yes, very nice. For sure.
Again, extremely smart, extremely shrewd.
I mean, these elves live for thousands upon thousands of years. You'd think they'd learn a thing or two after a few millennia.
He had to be taught by a human how to take. Okay, they butchered the fucking lore, but how to take the mithril, because that's what they did with the mithril in one of the episodes. They imbued it into the rings because it's supposed to be connected to the elf's essence.
Oh my god!
Yes, I know. I'm saying if I remember the episode correctly, that's what they did, and because it was a different metal, they had to figure out how to get it so they actually stayed. And I was he had to be helped by the human Hellbrand.
Of course, because humans at that time were well respected, especially the ones who decided to stay in Middle Earth and not go to Numenor. Those humans were great.
Yeah.
Like, for those of you who don't know, after the fall of Melkor or Morgoth, whatever you want to call him, but they're both correct, there was a certain brand of humans, the Numenorians, who were like, "Hey, we helped out in this great war. We're going to be better than the other humans." The other humans who stayed behind in Middle Earth were usually the ones who followed Sauron or and Melkor, or were just not really great people. But there were some good humans that stayed behind, and those became the Rohirrim, which, like, in my favorite group besides people from Gondor or the Gondorians is Rohan. Like, I love Rohan because those were just men. Those were just good men. They didn't get any special extended lives. They didn't get any other, they don't have any elvish blood.
Like
they are just
or anything like that. Nothing like they were just actually decent people, and this is why it's like I have like. With all the red flags around the War of the Rohirrim's like animated film that's coming out, I don't know if you like saw my videos, but like all those red flags, I'm like, why are you doing that? Like,
I read an article last Saturday about.
Then I read the story of Helm Hammerhand because it's basically really short. It's in the appendices and like what transpired, and I'm like, why aren't you telling it from his perspective? He at one point he literally goes out disguised as a snow troll and kills men with his bare hands.
But no, we're gonna get the point of view of his daughter that's not named, and they just gave her a name because whammon.
Yeah.
I had such high hopes for this. Actually, like later on my channel, I'm going to be posting some snippets of my show from last week. I was saying that the Chronicles of Narnia was last week. That was the week before. My bad, y'all. I'm sure I'm going to get comments, Billy. That's not last week. That was the week before, man. Don't know your own shows. But last week, I read an article about the War of the Rohirrim, and I just like. I had high hopes because like the one of the directors from Ghost in the Shell is going to be on the project because it's going to be an animated movie. And I was like, okay, we got some real Japanese, people they're going to be working on this. It's going to be great.
That, it's like the animation style alone intrigued me because I was like, okay. And it's not Amazon, it's Warner Brothers. So, like, I'm not exactly a fan of Warner Brothers, but at the same time, it's like, okay, I'm going to give this a chance. I'm liking what I'm hearing and everything.
I have a better track record than Amazon right now.
Yes, and then those reports, essentially, news came out from like that festival, and I'm like, that's all I can do at this point. It's like yes, take a page out of Amazon's book. What could possibly go wrong?
Right, because like I think from the article that I read, we're going to get the perspective of his daughter, who nobody really gave a crap about.
But he's only mentioned really in one or two sentences, no name, and it's only because Freka wants Helm to marry his Helm's daughter to Freka's son, and Helm basically just says no and punches him, and kills Freka with one punch.
And the other part of the article that I read also says that the main, like the war is not the high point of the movie. It's actually like something that happens earlier on, and we're getting we see the aftermath. We're seeing the aftermath of the war, and that's going to be the main story of the movie. Is how do they recover from the war? How do they rebuild? I'm like, what?
I was like, like one of the articles I covered, it says like Edoras says Edoras is destroyed, and I'm like, no, Edoras was not destroyed. I'm saying it doesn't exactly come out unscathed because it is a war, so yes, it's going to be damaged and everything, but it wasn't destroyed because it was literally used as, you have Freka's son Wolf basically crowning himself king there, using that as like basically his city. And then Freyalof comes down, which is like Helm's nephew. Now, I guess to the movie's credit, they still have Freyalof assuming the throne because that's what happens after Helm dies.
But well, like I was hoping that the high point, like towards the end of the movie, is when we're gonna see all the build up and all of the strifing between the Orlings and like all of the other things going into it, and then finally the culmination is the battle. But from the article that I read, the battle happens pretty early on, and we're just going to be watching the aftermath. It's like, so it's Game of Thrones.
I think I'm still going to watch it, although I'm going to try to
Me
find a way
too.
to like to sail the high seas for it, just because it's like I don't want to like now I don't want to give Warner Brothers any clicks or anything like wherever they're going, whatever streaming service they're going to have it on. I don't want to give it any clicks.
I'm about the same way. I was so heartbroken, like on my stream. Like I like literally just paused for a good minute. I was like, wait, what? No.
I would like one of the high points to be like actually seeing, like I said, Helm going out and killing men with his bare hands, like not taking any weapons with him, because in his mind it's like, if I don't use a weapon, no weapon can be used on me. And so he's killing these men with his bare hands and dies standing up in the snow. So basically, like, you know, that statue of him is pretty much how he was when he, like, they found him dead, still standing, frozen.
Mm-hmm. And they're gonna cuck him.
Yeah, I was like, oh my god. Because like I said, I read the story on my solo stream, so I was like, you know, for those of you in the chat, here is the story. So like you now have perspective on why I am upset at what's going on, and this is the actual story that they should have been adapting. And I read it. It's only like a couple pages in length long. It's really not long at all. So I'm fine with it being adapted. It could conceivably be adapted given everything that's mentioned in even just that short story. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, I know there's going to be aftermath after the war. We've literally seen it.
Like, I don't want it to be one of those like where yes, we see the war and then we just see a bunch of people fighting for the throne of Helm Hammerhand, like that, because that's what it's going to be. It's going to be his daughter. She's probably going to be like, well, I'm the daughter, so I should get to the throne. And they're going to be like, no, you're a woman, you can't have the throne. And she's going to be like, watch me, bees.
like I said, like, you know, according to Bounty in the comics, like Freyalof does become king at the end, but they don't exactly say how. So I don't know.
So they are breaking the lore.
It's because Freyalof does become king in the story.
Oh, okay.
That's Helm's
nephew. Okay, right. I keep thinking that's the name of the girl, and I'm like,
Hera, which sounds like a Greek name. Not
it is. It's it's Zeus's wife's name, and she is not a likable character in Greek mythology. For any of you who don't know, like my favorite time period to study is the Greco-Roman period. So like I know a little bit about that, but like Hera is not a name you want to name your kid, man. Like she constantly hates humanity and uses humanity, and it's just she's spiteful.
When I was talking to my chat on one of the streams, because it was when I was like student teaching and we were going into the Odyssey, and I'm just like you like read Greek mythology, they're dicks. All the Greeks and goddesses, they're pretty much dicks.
They just hate each other and they spite each other, and sometimes they'll use humanity to spite each other. Because Zeus is like, you can't attack each other physically, and so they're like, okay, we'll just use humans.
Yeah, they pretty much use humans as pawns. So I'm like, but like they said, like they're naming the daughter Hera, and I'm like, that's a Greek name. Like, why are you calling her that? Like, why are you calling her that?
The Rohirrim are supposed to be Anglo-Saxon, like one for one, almost Anglo-Saxon. So why not give her an Anglo-Saxon name? Why is that so hard? Name her Freya if you want to.
So,
you want to go with the...
Yeah, that sounds more Anglo-Saxon than Hera. Definitely. Like,
and Freya was the wife of Odin. So if you want to go with some sort of Norse god, Freya is a perfect name.
Yeah. And like, even like, it's like alter the spelling. So it's like not exactly the spelling of like Freya, but like an allusion to her name pretty much. But it would still sound Anglo-Saxon.
Which that's not hard. Just put a couple accent marks there.
Yeah. It's really not hard to do it all, but like I read those articles, and basically whatever optimism I had for the movie just died each like report that came out, like we're going to see in the movie, and I'm like,
I'm sad.
Yes.
Well, I thought we were going to get to some articles, but we're about at the 2-hour mark. So what do you want to shout out? What have you got coming up? So this is going to be posted Saturday. So what are you going to have coming up?
Okay, it's going to be posted Saturday. So, okay, so since this is posted Saturday, this Saturday evening or Sunday afternoon, I will be part of Talk Nerdy to Us. It'll be on My Nerdy Homes channel. Either Saturday evening or Sunday afternoon. It depends on her schedule because she her schedule is very much busy on the weekend, so sometimes she's unable to do it the normal time we do it, 9 p.m. Eastern, Saturday evening. But that is what over the weekend I will be doing. One of the things over the weekend I will be doing, so come check that out. Talk Nerdy to Us. We literally talk nerdy. In the last episode we broke down and demolished the Flash movie. So go check that out. That was on my channel. Universe, like at least the movie that we agree to hate because we dislike that movie pretty much. And then Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening time frame, I generally go live on my Kick, Jade Shadow. Sundays I dedicate to Marvel Spider-Man Remastered. I'm going through that first game in anticipation of the second game, so I'm trying to get through the first one about 73% of the way through. So come hang out then, and then throughout the week, pretty much look for videos. I apologize, they are very much sporadic now because of the fact that I have to be on hand during my parents' renovation of their kitchen, so I'm unable to do videos as often as I normally do, but I do try to stream as much as possible in the evenings on Kick, and I keep my Twitch, Jade Fire. So tune in for that, where I do 1 or 2 streams a week on that channel, not completely giving it up. So yeah. So Halo Master Chief Collection, Spider-Man Remastered, Apex Legends, going to try my hand at Dead by Daylight at some point this Friday. So yeah.
Do it.
Variety gamer, pretty much.
Yes, variety gaming. That's the way to go, in my opinion. Just nailing, like sticking yourself in just one game. Like a lot of people are like, that's the way to grow. And I'm just like, that also leaves you in a small little space. I like to have options.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's going to be roughly a little less than a week once this is posted on Saturday. As of today, as of this recording, I am now finally at 200 subscribers on my YouTube channel. So yay, finally getting to that mark. And because this is super early, because I had that goal for the end of this month, so we reached that goal pretty fast, so that's exciting. And onwards and upwards, and just be looking out for stuff on my YouTube channel. I'm gonna get on the grind for YouTube. I'm staying on Twitch right now. I will sometimes, like probably special occasions, switch over to Kick. I've just realized my last Kick stream, my OBS was having some issues because my computer, God rest its soul, is trying so hard and it just can't handle it. So I'm gonna be working on getting a new PC. Yes, it's like, I can do it, and then it stutters and just dies, and I'm like, okay, it's okay, little buddy, you just stay. All right, so we'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.